ככה לצמצם את האפקט.
Over the next 7 days, we're going to present expert testimony, scientific studies, and medical data in as concise and understandable manner as possible so that you can make wise decisions based upon informed choice. A big part of making wise medical decisions is the concept of informed consent.
The idea behind informed consent is that whenever you do a medical procedure, you have to talk to the patient about the benefits of the procedure, the possible complications with the procedure, and the other options that you may have. So with vaccinations, you have to talk about what are the positives of vaccinating your child, what are the potential negatives of vaccinating your child, and what are the alternatives. And one of the alternatives always has to be not vaccinating or spacing out the vaccines. And the problem is that doctors are incredibly busy. They're getting, they have less than 15 minutes in the office with a family. They hand them a piece of paper that comes from the CDC. That's not informed consent. That's not really saying to them, okay, look at this is really the pluses and minuses. And the problem is that most doctors in America haven't actually taken the time to do the fundamental research that they need to do to figure out what the true risks and benefits are of any given vaccine. So in this country, we don't really have informed consent when it comes to vaccines.
There's a term that I remember vividly being taught in medical school, and that's iatrogenic. So iatrogenic is caused by what we do. All right, if you take
what a doctor does.
Exactly. Okay. So if you take a medicine that I prescribe and it makes you ill or causes you harm, that's iatrogenic. All right, and I think we've lost our way in looking at vaccines and looking at what are the iatrogenic effects. In other words, what harm is being done by our vaccine program. So I wrote this book, The Vaccine Friendly Plan.
Because just so people know, you're not anti-vaccine.
Absolutely not. So the dilemma I was in 2008 after I had those 4 cases of children who regressed into severe autism, and I'd already learned about toxicity. I'd read studies on thimerosal, on aluminum toxicity. I mean, there's books on this topic. I could no longer ethically keep doing vaccines business as usual with the CDC schedule.
If you're going to give parents informed consent before they take these vaccines, don't just tell them that the vaccine was responsible for lowering the incidence of cases of measles. Tell them that there's studies that if you take showing that if you take this measles vaccine, you're statistically significantly more likely to be hospitalized after receiving that vaccine. Okay? You're more likely to have epileptic seizures. You're more likely to have allergies as a result of that vaccine. Okay? That's well documented. You're more likely to develop cancers and heart disease in later life if you've taken that vaccine, because it has suppressed you from being able to develop those protective effects that you gain when you are exposed to that disease naturally as a child. So if you want informed consent, you have to have all of that information, access to all of that information, so that then you can make an informed decision, and then you have to be free to accept or reject vaccines.
According to the CDC, there is no federal requirement for informed consent regarding immunizations.
In an attempt to have a safer vaccine approach, I did something in 2008 when I started integrative pediatrics that is pretty much unheard of for a pediatrician to do, and that is to one by one give parents the real facts about the vaccine, the benefits of the vaccine, the risks, and the alternatives. So informed consent. And I truly believe this is what doctors should do. We need to get back to doing that if we're doing something to a healthy person. You know, you got a healthy child in front of you and you're saying, well, we're gonna do this thing to you, this vaccine, and it's a good idea. And all they're being told is it's safe and effective, do it. And oh, by the way, if you don't do it, you're gonna have to leave my practice. That's what's happening today. That should be illegal. I mean, if you have a doctor that's telling you to leave your practice if you don't do what I say, that's called paternalism, and we were taught in medical school that is the worst way to practice medicine. And yet the Academy of Pediatrics is now saying that's okay.
I've learned about the measles, mumps, rubella, that it can wear off, and then they have to do a booster before children go to elementary school. So it's something where it's not 100% effective, it's going to wear off, and the whole theory behind immunization is that we'll get herd immunity, and then everybody will be safe because so many people have been vaccinated. But if I come back to the flu vaccine and talk about herd immunity, if you go on the CDC website, for the last 5 years on average, the vaccine effectiveness was 43%. That means the majority of the people are not protected by the flu vaccine that they've received. And 3 years ago, the vaccine effectiveness was only 19%. That was the year when they just guessed wrong on what the prevalent strains would be during that flu season. And that means 80 out of 100 people were not immunized, were not protected when they received their flu vaccine. These are things that the American public doesn't know. And when we're told you have to have a mandatory vaccination, they're not told that there's a good chance it may not work, and even if it does work, it may only work for a very limited period of time. So these are things of major concern.
כמו שאמרתי, אפילו בספר הלימוד הבסיסי של רפואת ילדים, ויטמין A טיפול לא מופיע בהנחיות במדינת ישראל. לא ניתן בפועל. כשאנחנו דיברנו עם חולים באותו זמן ופנינו אליהם, שאלנו אותם, הציעו לכם לטפל בוויטמין A? כי רצינו לדעת מה הפרקטיקה שמיישמים פה, איך מנסים לעזור לאלה שאכן חלו בחצבת. כמובן שלא, כי זאת לא המטרה. המטרה היא לא באמת בריאות הציבור. והנה באמת לגבי ויטמין A, כמו שאמרנו, כבר ב-1932, ראינו 1935 תמותה של 3.1 ל-100,000, ב-1932 כבר גילו את היתרון שבתיסוף של ויטמין A, ועדיין, שנות ה-2000, אף אחד לא מגלה לנו את זה. היום אנחנו יודעים שהטיפול לחצבת, למשל, למי שיש לו תסמינים, זה ויטמין A במינון גבוה. ויטמין A במינון גבוה מפחית את הסיבוכים של חצבת בעשרות אחוזים. זה משהו שמופיע באתר של ארגון הבריאות העולמי ובכל מקום, ועדיין איפשהו מצליחים להשתיק את זה ולא לדבר על זה. גם ב-2018, כשהייתה את המגפה בישראל, הייתי מצפה שהכותרות בעיתונים יהיו, אם יש לכם תסמינים, קחו ויטמין A. אבל זאת לא הייתה המטרה שלהם. המטרה שלהם הייתה אחרת לגמרי, ואנחנו נגיע גם לזה.
In California, the worst measles outbreak in 15 years is spreading.
The virus is roaring back into the headlines tonight. An outbreak somehow traced to
someone who had probably caught measles abroad visited Disneyland and may have sneezed. measles on the march in America.
This outbreak is showing no signs of letting up. There are already more cases this year than there were.
The number tripled to 644 measles cases reported in 27 states.
And I mean, is this all basically because of the anti-vaccination movement, because parents aren't vaccinating their kids?
Yeah, you know, I think so.
A bill that would ban exemptions from childhood vaccines is advancing through the California legislature.
We are authoring legislation that will abolish the personal belief exemption.
I think you're starting to see why it is that mandates are so important.
Let's get to the point. Is measles deadly? I'm bringing on Dr. Bob Sears to get to the heart of that. Bob, can you hear me?
Yeah, hey, Del.
Hey, Bob, thanks
I
for
can hear you
joining me.
fine.
I know you're in the middle of, you know, a day at the clinic and seeing your patients, so we're going to make this really quick. Is measles deadly, Bob? Can you just give me, like, how do we scientifically look at that? I mean, there's a lot of emotion around this. What do we know about the science of measles and how deadly it is?
Well, the best science we have, Del, is basically what was the fatality rate back in the United States when everyone used to catch measles. When every single child caught it and developed lifetime immunity, the fatality rate was about 1 in 10,000 children who caught the disease suffered a fatality. 1 in 10,000. You know, some adults caught it as well. So if we look at our whole population, it was something like 1 in 500,000 of our entire population would suffer fatality from measles. And so, no, it's not a disease that rampages through a country and kills everyone left and right. You know, we've been very fortunate in the United States, in a well-fed, well-nourished country like ours, where people are not deficient in vitamin A. The fatality rate is extremely low. And we have not had a child die of measles. I believe the last child who died was 2003. Oh, time to go on your show, Del. Sorry.
Oh, all right, there we go.
Sorry, cell phone.
So
2003 was the last fatality in a child here.
So I use that. I've said oftentimes it's this in 1960, before the vaccine ever arrives, the death rate of measles is 1 in 500,000 people. I mean, that's a 0.0000 something nothing that you could even imagine. And people say, well, you're manipulating the truth. But it's really not. I mean, I think that's the more accurate way to talk about the measles, because we talk about something that really is contagious. It goes all over. And when you're going to spread hype on your news, telling everybody, you better be afraid of dying of this issue, what you're saying is you personally are in danger. Well, first of all, you are not personally in danger at a rate any higher than 1 in 500,000 people dying. Now, we could get to, and because there's still, you're not all going to even catch the measles. So what you're saying is even those that caught it, and it was contagious, so it was like 3 to 5 million people every year. Of them, still only 1 in 10,000 died. Now, what were those patients like at that time? Were those was that like a healthy, robust, you know, child running around?
Well, it was a mixture. We know for sure if you are malnourished and you're low in vitamin A, as some children were back there, and your risk of dying is way, way higher. We know that for a fact. So you're right. Now we're better at medicine. Now we're better at nutrition. Our kids are, hopefully are healthier or better nourished than they were 50 years ago. And we also know you can use high dose vitamin A therapy. If you're exposed to measles and you get 2 days of very high dose vitamin A, that lowers the complications of diseases dramatically, of measles dramatically. And so, we have better medicine. If you do get really sick, we can hospitalize you and support you. So, if we had measles go around in our population again now, I feel like we would not see a fatality rate of 1 in 10,000 like we did back then. I think the rate would be much lower than that.
Wow.
Del, the reality is, will we have a fatality again in the United States in the years to come? Yes, we probably will. I mean, I think that kind of goes without saying.
Sure.
It has not happened in kids since 2003. When it happens, the crap is going to hit the fan because of the mentality that you were just describing,
right?
Prior to having me on. But what is each individual child's risk of dying if they are caught up in an outbreak and they're a healthy, well-nourished child? That risk is not technically zero, but it's as close to zero as you can possibly get.
I appreciate you taking the time, Bob. That was very informative. Mm-hmm. Go ahead and get back to your patients. We look forward to talking to you again soon.
All right. Thanks, Del.
Thank you. You know, I mean, there you have it. If it's even lower, so it's going to be even lower than 1 in 500,000, your risk right now. And vitamin A, you know, hopefully your doctor knows, just take some vitamin A. Don't even come into the hospital unless you're really experiencing, you know, some sort of complications. But let's talk about the deaths. I mean, because they do happen. Very rarely, as Bob pointed out, the next death is going to be the biggest news story there is. And I want to make something very clear, too, right now, that we hear about world death rates. They do this all the time in order to terrify everybody about the measles, saying hundreds of thousands of people are going to die this year from the measles. As we pointed out, if you're malnourished, if you have flies around your lips and you have a distended stomach and you're eating 1 bowl of rice a week, you know, measles is going to be a very problematic issue, illness, infection for you. But so is any infection. I mean, any type of malaria or dysentery, you're going to be in real trouble. But if your child is running around in your yard right now, able to laugh and talk, that child is going to do very well. But I want to bring on Jeffrey Jackson to discuss what are the actual numbers, because we get this question all the time. And I've seen quotes of certain dates. I know Bob just said 2003, but I've heard some other quotes. So we went, and I had Jeffrey Jackson look into every possible measles death we'd had in, say, the last 20 years. So let's have Jeffrey join us right now. Hey, Jeffrey. I'm doing good. How are you doing?
Doing all right.
All right. It's measles mania out there. Every news anchor will say it's deadly. It should be dead. Can we get that little clip of that doctor just saying it's deadly, just to remind people what it sounds like on the news? Do you have that little short misinformation clip we made? Is that still in there? Hold on. I just want to get a vibe of this, because you know, I kind of want to make fun of these people that really go out of the way to give us a sense of that. I'm making this hard on my team today.
Measles actually kills people.
So measles actually kills people. Jeffrey, when was the last, most recent death from the measles? At least as far as in some reports, I heard something around 2015 or 13. Is there a case in there?
Yes, correct. It's 2015. It was a woman, and she had underlying conditions. So I looked back at the Seattle Times. It was a woman from Washington State. So I looked at the reporting at Seattle Times at the time, and this is what they wrote about it. It was this is a quote: the young woman's health condition was redacted from public records, but it required her to take drugs that suppressed her immune system. She may have been vaccinated against measles as a child, but her family couldn't produce the evidence, which left her status categorized as unknown. So she had no obvious symptoms of the measles, but was tested after she passed away from pneumonia, and she was on immunosuppressive drugs for other underlying health conditions. So that was 2015. And like Dr. Sears said, 2003
well, hold on. So let me just look at that case, because that's the one that gets thrown in my face all the time. I've said 2003, but this 2015 case, so this is a woman, let me get this straight. She's in a hospital. She's got some other illness. She ultimately has pneumonia. She's on immunosuppressive drugs. After she dies, someone does a blood test and finds titers, right? Saying her body obviously fought the measles at some point. Was that during an epidemic? Were there cases of measles that we knew she caught it from in that town?
No epidemic at the time. It was. It looked like somewhat of an isolated case, and like it said in the reporting, it wasn't even clear if she had been vaccinated as a child. So her category or status was unknown at the time as far as vaccination status.
So looking at her post-mortem, we just decided she somehow spontaneously exploded into measles that they didn't see. There was no rash. CDC didn't confirm it, but we know that there was some titers in there. And so this is one of the cases that you will hear brought up. Well, there was a case in 2015 where a grown woman died. Well, there's your facts. You can decide whether you want to report that or not. To me, not CDC verified. She didn't come in with a rash or presenting as measles. Nobody even put measles on her chart. But after she died from pneumonia while on immunosuppressive drugs, and probably because of, we don't even know why she was on those drugs, but she was
they
obviously
redacted it from public records.
So there's a very sick woman, and somebody decided to make that a measles case, is what it sounds like to me. So there's your 2015 case. Now, before that, then what is the next runner-up?
So we have a child, like Dr. Sears mentioned, in 2003, and this child was 13 years old, had recently received a bone marrow transplant for a rare disease, and after that had passed away 4 months later. Measles was confirmed after the death once again, so it was not confirmed while the child was living, much like the woman in 2015.
So now, so we have a child in the hospital, bone marrow transplant. And, you know, I have to say, I worked on the doctors, you know, surgeons, you know, are sort of rated by their death rate, right? They're rated by, you know, are they good at what they do? How many bone marrow transplants? Did someone die of a bone marrow transplant? And if you're going to say, you know, I have a lot of success with bone marrow transplants, every death from the procedure sort of goes against you. It certainly goes against being able to talk someone into it. So it'd be really nice if you could say, hey, I had a great patient, you know, bone marrow transplant was doing great, but then they died of the measles. But nobody even saw this kid catch the measles, right? Again, this case, and this one's held up a lot. The child, children die. So this is the kid in 2003 that died. And again, they only find it post-mortem. And the child had absolutely no immune system whatsoever. So I suppose there's a chance, you know, and I say this all the time, and we're going to get into a little bit later, does measles shed? But on the door of that cancer ward, I'll bet you it said, if you've been recently vaccinated, do not enter here. People with, you know, weakened immune systems are in here. Well, why would that be the sign? And we pointed this out. Johns Hopkins and different hospitals have that sign. Here it is. If you have any of the symptoms below, please not visit. Fever, diarrhea, flu-like, sneeze, eye drainage, skin, and if you've had a live vaccine within 30 days, chickenpox, MMR, shingles, nasal flu mist, rotavirus, or yellow fever, do not come in here. So when you hear that vaccines are safe and nobody sheds it, well, that flies in the face of that. Was there a measles outbreak while this kid was in the hospital? Did we have a huge outbreak around that town?
No, there wasn't. It was measles. Measles were, as far as the death was concerned, there was nothing else going on, obviously, and the numbers were nothing substantial in that town.
So no measles. In fact, my understanding of that story is they don't even know where he got it because it wasn't anywhere in the city or state at that time. Okay, so before that, so that's 2003. I know a lot about that one. Now, then what's the next one that we see?
Well, this comes from the Journals of Infectious Diseases. They did a kind of retrospective study, and during 1993 to 1999, they can only find one acute measles-related death reported to the CDC's National Center for Health Statistics. So there's a pretty big gap there with measles. I looked through a lot of the reports, the summary of notifiable diseases for the CDC for almost 2 decades, or a little over 2 decades, and there wasn't too much to be talked about. They have ICD numbers in there. These are the health system's medical diagnosis that they kind of slap on for measles. So there was a couple numbers there, but those aren't lab confirmed. So that's a whole different story. That could be, you know, anywhere. It's like saying someone passed away of pneumonia, and you can say, well, they died of the flu because they didn't get the flu shot that year, but it's kind of like a catch-all diagnosis. So when we're looking for lab confirmed, that's when we're having the problem here, really going back in the last couple of decades and finding these cases.
Right. And this is something, Jeffrey, that I keep pointing out. It's amazing because this isn't the first year we're hearing measles is deadly. We all went through the Disneyland outbreak, deadly measles, deadly measles, deadly measles. You know, am I the only one in America still alive? And I'm speaking to all of you out there. Am I the only one that, you know, wants some accountability from my news agencies? I mean, am I the only one that says, if you're going to say something's deadly, I want to see a death? If you're going to call it a deadly snowstorm, how did someone die from the snow? Like, I need to see a death. Usually that's like a car accident or something. But someone has to have died. And now, year upon year upon year, deadly measles, deadly measles, deadly measles, deadly measles, and no one's dying. And right now, we're up over 700 cases that we know of. You know, I would guess that there's a lot of people that are having measles parties right now quietly because you've got this terror now. You have a government that's deciding to quarantine people and saying you're going to be banned from the streets and public spaces. Well, when you start hearing that and you're saying, and the only way in the future I can, you know, avoid being quarantined or put in a cell block, or is that I'm going to just have had the measles? I mean, they're driving people to measles parties. It used to be something fun you did just to get out of the way. Now you got to do it to make sure that your kid's going to be able to freely walk down the street the rest of their life without being quarantined. So I imagine that the numbers are much higher, but where are the deaths, folks? Doesn't it bother you to hear every news anchor you trust, every medical reporter tell you it's deadly, and yet in the giant measles outbreak, you know, around Disneyland, and during the one right now, nobody's died yet, nobody's dying. Does it feel like this thing's being sensationalized, at least a little bit? At least a little bit? Well, so Jeffrey, thank you for pointing it out. So in the last 20 years, we have about 3 cases. 2 of them are really debatable whether they're even decent cases. And so, you know, there we have it.
אז כשהם אומרים לנו 1 ל-1000 וכשהם אומרים לנו 1 ל-500, אז בוודאי שלא רק שהם טועים, הם פשוט משקרים. אוקיי? כי אני מניחה שהם יודעים יפה, כמו שאני יודעת להגיע לנתונים האלה, גם הם יודעים להגיע לנתונים האלה.
In our democracy, you have a number of institutions that are there to protect little children from predatory corporations, and all of these have been neutralized here. You have the regulatory agency, the front line protector of public health, that has been captured by the agency to become a sock puppet to the industry that it's supposed to regulate. It's an arm of the pharmaceutical industry. CDC sells $4.6 billion worth of vaccines every year itself.
Wait,
it owns the patent.
CDC sells vaccines?
Yes, CDC sells vaccines. So CDC is regulating an industry that it's part of.
Robert F. Kennedy Jr. just stated that the CDC sells vaccines and actually holds patents on vaccines. I wanted to verify this, so I did a patent search. Turns out that he's accurate. The CDC actually is listed as an assignee on over 50 patents related to vaccines, including flu, rotavirus, hepatitis A, HIV, anthrax, rabies, pneumococcal, meningococcal, and several other vaccines. Does this seem like a public health agency that's making independent vaccine recommendations? Or does it seem like an agency acting as a risk management group that influences public opinion?
אבל לפעמים פשוט מספיק להבין שמשקרים לך. ותראו, למשל ככה נראה דיון לגבי האם להכניס חיסון לשגרת החיסונים במדינת ישראל או לא. קיבלתי מחברת פייזר גרנטים, פרופסור דגן, גרינברג, שותף במחקרים וגרנטים של 2 החברות. רשפון, רשאים להשתתף בדיונים. אוקיי? ומה החומר שהם מקבלים? 3 המאמרים שהועברו לוועדה על ידי נציגי חברת GSK. החומר שמציגים בוועדה זה חומר שיווקי שמגיע מיצרנית החיסון. האנשים שדנים זה אנשים שמקבלים גרנטים מאותה יצרנית חיסון, הם משתתפים, ובסופו של דבר אלה שאולי יושבים שם וזה, הם מצביעים בשקט. על סמך מה בדיוק. ויש להם אינסוף טכניקות. תראה, מי מקבל את ההחלטות בפועל? בוא נגיד שבחיסוני השגרה, מי שמקבל את ההחלטות בפועל, זה הוועדה המייעצת למחלות זיהומיות וחיסונים, שמקבלים גרנטים מפה. וגרנטים משם, וכסף מפה וכסף מפה, ולוקחים אותם לכנס הזה ולכנס הזה, והם גם מעבירים שם הרצאות ומייעצים, והם גם, יש להם גם פטנטים רשומים בכל מיני מקומות. הם אלה שמייעצים להם. את חושבת שביבי או בנט או לפיד או מישהו מהטמבלים, הבובות האלה שיושבות שם, יש להם מושג במשהו, הם שבויים בטענה הזאת של הקונצנזוס. הם שבויים שם, הם רואים את אותן קריקטורות, כמו שכל הרופאי משפחה רואים. הם לא מרוויחים מזה כסף, אבל אין להם מושג מה הם עושים. ואולי כן, אולי הם מקבלים, אני לא יודעת. אנחנו לא יודעים מה הולך מאחורי הקלעים. ואותו דבר פה. היה איזשהו הסכם מושחר, אנחנו לא יודעים מי מקבל, מה מקבל ועל מי מאיימים פה. ומי יושב ומקבל את ההחלטות האלה? 4 וטרינרים וקב"ט. אוקיי? וכששואלים אנשים שהם מומחים, זוכי פרס נובל, ואנשים שיש להם חלק בפיתוח של הטכנולוגיה הזאת, והם אומרים לא, לא, חלילה לא, אז משתיקים אותם, כי thou shall not question. ספר נהדר, בעברית הוא נקרא רפואת יתר. זה הספר הזה מפרט את כל הדרכים שמעוותים מחקרים ופרסומים, ואת כל הלחצים שמפעילים על אנשים מהתעשייה הזאת, ומה המשמעות של ביקורת עמיתים. כל הזמן אומרים, זה לא מחקר שפורסם עם ביקורת עמיתים. לא, כי ביקורת עמיתים זה בדיוק לבוא ללקק לבוס שלך ולהגיד לו את מה שהוא רוצה לשמוע. כשאני עשיתי את התזה שלי, והייתי צריכה, וידעתי מי יושב בוועדה שלי, אז הייתי צריכה להיזהר לא להגיד שהפתרון שלי יותר טוב חלילה מהפתרון של אחד מאלה שיושבים אצלי בוועדה. הייתי צריכה לשבח, להגיד זה מתאים למקרים אחרים, כי אני לא רוצה להסתבך עם הפרופסורים המכובדים שיושבים שם. אז זה בקטנה אצלי, כן? בקטנה מאוד, כי זה תעשייה אחרת לגמרי. אתם חושבים שבעולם הרפואה זה לא ככה? יבוא מישהו לפרסם איזה מחקר שחיסונים זה זוועת עולם, ויושב בביקורת עמיתים שלו מישהו שחתום על פטנטים בחיסונים, איך זה יעבור? ביקורת עמיתים, בקיצור הספר הזה מפרט היטב מה שווים כל הדברים האלה, ומה זה אומר.
And if that's what's happening, if we're layering assumptions upon assumptions, and scientists are telling us we really don't know how the vaccine works, we really don't know how the disease works, we're going to force these on you without a choice, then I think we're way past calling this science. Because we're not using the scientific method to say it's safe. I think it might be a little bit more like a religion. So let's look at a religion, a cause, principle, or system of beliefs held to with ardor and faith. If you have a religion, you need a clergy, you need someone laying down, your Bible, and in this case, let's call it the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices. Very quickly, a manufacturer goes to the FDA, they say, here's our brand new vaccine, here's the safety trials we did ourselves, hopefully you believe us, what we say about it, FDA approves it and put it on the market. But it really doesn't get to you until the CDC gets it in this committee, the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices. They're the ones that say, we love it so much, we're going to add it to the childhood schedule, or add it to the adult schedule. The moment they do that, that is when it is mandated on all of our children. That's when they get the immunity from liability. That's when every kid, whether they can pay for it or not, it will be paid for by our government. So this product, with this vote, becomes a $1 billion product immediately. Immediately. So I've been going to these ACIP meetings, and what you discover is once they vote yes and everyone loves it, you watch all these reporters rush out of the room because GSK just made at least $1 billion. Huge, huge decisions being made here. Scientific body put together. We now know that all of the investigations into that scientific body, they're granting blanket waivers even if you are working on a vaccine yourself. In fact, Paul Offit, one of the biggest people that speaks out for vaccines, was making a rotavirus vaccine while he was on this panel voting to add what to the schedule? A rotavirus vaccine. He ended up making multi-millions of dollars up of a product when he had been the one to advise we need a rotavirus vaccine to our country. So that's how bad it is. Let's move on, because again, someone out there saying, well, Del, that's your opinion. You're saying that there's conflicts of interest. They're not doing the right job. I've been going to these for about 3 years now. They're every 3 months. This was about 6 months ago or so. They're about to vote on a brand new hepatitis B vaccine. I want you to listen to it yourself. I know you're not a doctor, but I think you're allowed to have an opinion about this.
Is there any comment on using this vaccine at the same time with other adjuvanted vaccines?
We have no data to make a recommendation one way or the other.
So just to sort of put this in context of other vaccines, whilst preclinical studies were not done using these vaccines simultaneously, our general approach to immunizations is that they can be given at the same time in different limbs.
Dr. Hunter?
Are multiple adjuvanted vaccines used in Europe or other markets?
Dr. Ward, do you want to comment?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. I think unless there's any further discussion, we will take a vote on this recommendation.
I want to remind everyone to please check your voting machine thing, and voting is open.
Thank you very much. So the voting is completed, and it is unanimous to support this recommendation. Thank you all.
I mean, I don't know where to get started. Let me take you through it if you're brand new to discussing this. The first question is, this brand new vaccine with a brand new adjuvant, did we give it at the same time as other adjuvanted vaccines? To be clear, the adjuvant for most of us in this movement is the most toxic part. That's what we're worried about. That's the aluminum load you heard Girardi talking about, autoimmune disease running rampant. Aluminum is what we're finding in the brains of autistic children when Dr. Exley is doing studies and dissecting them. So we're really worried about the adjuvant, okay? That's what sends your body into a hyper-allergic reaction. Let's just take you through it really quickly. From layman's terms, when you get a virus or bacteria, it either comes through your eyes, your nose, your mouth, or into your lungs, the mucosal areas. And you have an alarm system in your body that immediately recognizes them, and your body goes into a process. First, you have a T1 response, a cellular response that creates a memory throughout the cells of your body to always recognize this so you'll fight it forever. And then you have the second part, T2, which is the antibody response. That's where it reacts to the antigens and starts creating antibodies to those antigens. Up until this point, vaccines have only been able to create the antigens, the antibodies. Okay? That's why vaccines don't last. That's why you can't have herd immunity, because the vaccine doesn't last through life. DTaP vaccine we've just been talking about, you're getting 4, 5, and 6 of those by the time you're 18 because they just don't last. MMR vaccines at 2. They're talking about adding a third one in college, and there's 2 more on your adult schedule. Did you get that recently? Did you get out for your MMR vaccine? You'll have to in a minute. So here's the point. They wear off. But this vaccine is a brand new adjuvant that's going to do something no vaccine has done before. Because back in 2011, we gave a couple of scientists the Nobel Prize for something called toll-like receptors. You don't need to understand that. Just imagine the years. Very simply, we just discovered what triggers your innate immune system, your cellular immune system. We only discovered it 2011. We're celebrating it. 2018, we're going to now spelunk into a place in your body we've never been before with a brand new vaccine that's going to trigger your toll-like receptors. When doing that study, a really good question. Since we're going into a place we've never gone in the body before, and now we know everyone is basing the science on assumptions and don't really know how these things work, did we at least do a trial that gave this vaccine at the same time as an aluminum adjuvanted vaccine? We had no data on that. Never thought to do that. Oh, okay. Great question, by the way. Terrible answer. Really bad answer. And then you have the head of the group sit there and say, well, just so you know, if you're brand new to voting here today, when you do vote yes, that vaccine will be given at the same time as other adjuvanted vaccines, though we never tested for it. But don't worry, we'll deliver it in different limbs. Because look how far apart your 2 arms are. Nothing to worry about. What could possibly go wrong? It's like 3rd graders deciding the future of our species. Then a really good question comes. Okay, that's all making me really nervous. But anywhere else in the world, have they given multiple adjuvanted vaccines at the same time? Not to my knowledge. Great, good. Oh, whew. Well, let's vote. 100% yes. Why even ask those questions, honestly? Are you asking yourself, why ask the question? If the answer is no, we don't have an effing clue, and you're going to still vote yes anyway, then why are you even there? What's the point? As if that's not bad enough, listen to the conversation that happens after they voted this product that you are now being offered in your doctor's offices.
And does anybody around the table, we don't need to go around and verify our votes, but does anybody have any comments they wish to make about their vote? Dr. Stevens?
So just a slight reservation. I think this is a huge advance and a step forward. I am concerned about that signal, that myocardial infarction signal. I am concerned about the use of this new adjuvant and certainly urge us to continue to look at the post-marketing data carefully.
Dr. Hunter?
Just a question about that. How soon would we be getting that post-marketing data update here?
There's 2 kinds of data. The vaccine safety data link data will require people to be using the vaccine to develop substantive database. And Dr. Sun, do you want to comment on the post-marketing data that FDA is requiring?
I think
For the myocardial infarction study, we're seeing that the date for or likely for completion is May 31, 2020. There will also be studies looking at autoimmune diseases as well as herpes zoster, and there will be a pregnancy registry as well. So that's all included in the post-marketing surveillance.
Thank you.
The scientist, actually I think he's a pediatrician, says, now that we've all just voted 100% yes, I have a slight reservation. Though I think this is a great step forward for mankind, as though we're stepping onto the moon, which we are, spelunking into a part of your immune system we never have. I have a slight reservation. I have a slight reservation about the myocardial infarction signal. Does anyone know what a myocardial infarction is? Heart attack. I have a slight reservation about the heart attack signal. So there's computers outside of this room. I ran out of the room. I was sitting there. I ran right out of the room and said, myocardial infarction, heart attack, what is he talking about? So I type in the computer, Dynavax's Hepaslav B, which is what this was, and this is what pops up. FDA rejects Dynavax's hepatitis B vaccine. I'm like, what? But it had to have gotten through the FDA because I'm at the CDC, and they just put it on the schedule. I read further in the article, in the trial, an acute myocardial infarction, acute meaning it's likely people died, very serious heart attacks occurred in 14 people in the Dynavax group, but in only one person receiving the conventional vaccine, meaning, once again, the placebo group was getting the old vaccine. So one person died from the old vaccine, and 14 died in the new vaccine. People are dying, and by the way, trust me, if this is your product, they have the healthiest people they can find in these trials. They want good results because that's the only way they sell it to the FDA to make billions of dollars. So they killed, or some part of, 14 people. Maybe all, I'm not sure how many died, but they had heart attacks, and they know this. And the reason this article is the second time it went to the FDA, it's saying it's here for the second time. We still had a problem with the heart attack signal, so we said no. Fortunately, they don't have to do another vaccine. They don't have to make a new vaccine. They don't change it. They don't even do another trial because that would cost millions and millions of dollars. Instead, they get a bunch of people to sit around a room advertising people and say, how do we explain away the 14 people that had heart attacks in our trial? I don't know. Do we look at who's eating more McDonald's? There's got to be something else we can blame this on. And they did. Three's a charm. It got approved by the FDA. And now when you go to your doctor doesn't know any of this. They may think they're smarter than me, but I know for certain they're not sitting at these CDC meetings and watching this happen before their eyes. What they're going to hear is, this is a better vaccine because you only need 2, and the last one you needed 3. And if they go to the website of Dynavax's Hepaslav B, you know what the first thing it says? 100% approval by the CDC. Everyone loved it. They loved it. They don't know that at the CDC they're discussing surveillance programs to see how many people have heart attacks, how many people can have autoimmune diseases. Oh, by the way, we have a pregnancy registry to see how many women have miscarriages or die while pregnant when they get this vaccine. You see, you just became a part of a human trial you never signed up for. You are being analyzed and watched because you are simply just a herd. Just like they say, herd immunity, you're a cow, you're a goat, you're a monkey. We don't care about you or your children. We're going to see how many of you were affected by a vaccine that had 14 heart attacks in the trial.
And unfortunately, we are in a situation today where we have tremendous corruption, not only in Congress, which receives more money from pharmaceutical companies than any other industry. Pharmaceutical gives in lobbying twice the amount that oil and gas, which is the next big one, 4 times with defense and aerospace. There are more lobbyists, pharma lobbyists in Congress than there are members of Congress in the Senate. So we have lost the the legislative independence of that body. And unfortunately, Alan, the agencies are also captured. Now, you know about agency capture. It happens everywhere. And I've sued EPA my entire life. We just sued the EPA. We just sued Monsanto. We got an historic judgment, a $12 billion settlement in the Monsanto case, and I was part of that trial team. And one of the things that happened during that trial is that EPA took a position against us. They took a position that glyphosate Roundup does not cause cancer. As it turns out, we got an internal memorandum that showed that the head of the pesticide division in EPA was actually working secretly for Monsanto and killing studies and twisting studies and ghostwriting studies to falsify the science.
Look, you're doing
we
great.
We were able to show that to the jury. Now, imagine this. That's EPA, which is an independent agency. Imagine this. FDA, that's 50% of its budget from vaccine companies, from the industry, 50%. The CDC has an $11.5 billion budget, and $4.9 billion of that is buying and selling and distributing vaccines. CDC is a vaccine company. It owns 57 vaccine patents, so it can make money on every sale of a vaccine. NIH owns hundreds of vaccine patents. NIH owns half the patent for the Moderna vaccine. There's 5 individuals at NIH, and the rules at NIH, if you're a scientist or an official who worked on a vaccine, you're allowed to collect $150,000 a year in royalties on sales that that vaccine makes. These regulatory agencies are actually vaccine companies. The vaccine marketing sales part of those agencies is the tail that is now wagging the regulatory dog. They are not doing their job as regulators.
Many employees of the CDC end up in industry. Case in point, Dr. Julie Gerberding, who was the director of the CDC from 2001 until 2008, took a very lucrative position as the head of the vaccine division in Merck in 2009. She, was given stock options in the millions for that particular position, and so she overnight became a millionaire. There have been other employees that have gone on to lucrative positions. There's actually a revolving door between the CDC and the vaccine industry. Dr. Thompson himself came from Merck. He worked at Merck before he worked at the CDC. Dr. Frank DiStefano, who is the current head of the Immunization Safety Office at the CDC, actually left the CDC, went into industry, and then came back to the CDC. And so, you have this incestuous relationship between the pharmaceutical industry and the CDC. So really the driver is money. It's just like everything else. The driver is the almighty dollar. And when you get a vaccination on the schedule, when an individual, which could be a CDC employee, gets a vaccination on the schedule, that opens up a market for that particular vaccine that's in the billions of dollars.
Literally within a week, all pro-vaccine doctors had dropped out, one right after the other.
We have realized we can't find anybody to represent that side to come to the public. That should be very alarming for the community that does support vaccines.
I find it shocking that scientists and the doctors are not willing to have this conversation or stand up for the safety of these vaccines. There's a message in that really the science maybe is not so much on their side.
I want to thank Alan for participating in this debate. I've actually been trying to do a debate on this issue for 15 years. I've asked Peter Hotez, I've asked Paul Offit, I've asked all of the major leaders of who are promoting vaccines to debate me, and none of them have.
Robert F. Kennedy Jr. mentioned that Paul Offit has made an estimated $29 million on his Rototech vaccine. This next brief video is courtesy of Vaxxed and is indicative of the lack of willingness to debate this issue about vaccines. The cameraman, Joshua Coleman, the father of 9-year-old Otto Coleman, who was vaccine injured at 17 months of age, asks Paul Offit if he's willing to have a discussion about vaccines.
I think they wanted to see if they could get an interview with you, Paul. Are you up for that? An interview over the Vax bus?
Who are you?
I'm just a camera guy.
No.
You're not interested?
Are you kidding me?
Well, just we could talk about, differences in opinion and.
You know you can't do that here, right? Get out of here. Get the f*** out of here. Really, I don't want to talk to you.
All right.
All right?
I mean, I just think if you have the truth on your side, you'd be up for just having a conversation.
Out.
All right. Okay.
I need to ask who you are now.
I'm just a camera guy, like I said.
You're going to have to go do it.
All right. You have a good lunch.
Paul Offit has made millions of dollars on sales of his Rototech vaccine, but he's unwilling to have a debate. Perhaps in the previous video, he was just having a bad day.
If the debate is frowned upon and not allowed, then you have to ask the question, why isn't it okay to talk about these issues? What is at stake here? Why wouldn't we want to have the safest, the healthiest, and the most scientifically based vaccine schedule that we possibly could?